Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
I never thought I'd be in this situation. When my wife and I bought our house in Oakwood Estates 5 years ago, we were thrilled. It was our first home, a cute little brick ranch with a nice yard for our kids to play in. We loved the neighborhood, quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and a great school district. Sure, there was a Homeowners Association, but we figured it was no big deal. Boy, were we wrong. It all started last month when we got a letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was just another newsletter or something, but when I opened it, my jaw dropped. The HOA was implementing a bunch of new rules, and they were insane. I couldn't believe what I was reading. First off, they want us to sell our cars. Yeah, you heard that right. Apparently, our vehicles aren't up to standard for the neighborhood's new image. They're pushing for everyone to switch to electric or hybrid cars by 2026. Do they think money grows on trees? My trusty old Ford pickup has been with me for years, and now they want me to just get rid of it? But that's not even the craziest part. They're demanding that we add siding to all of our brick houses. Can you believe it? We bought this house specifically because we loved the brick exterior. It's sturdy, low maintenance, and looks great. Now they want us to cover it up with some fancy siding that'll probably need replacing in a few years anyway. And don't even get me started on the fences. Our chain link fence has been keeping our dog in the yard and our kids safe for years. But apparently, it's not aesthetically pleasing enough for the HOA. They want everyone to replace their fences with some overpriced wooden or vinyl options that they've pre-approved. As if all that wasn't bad enough, they're planning to inspect our houses. Like, actually come into our homes and tell us what needs to be fixed. They've set a deadline for all these changes to be completed by sometime in 2026. That's less than 2 years away. How are we supposed to afford all this? I did some quick math, and it's not pretty. Between selling my car at a loss and buying a new electric one, adding siding to the entire house, replacing the fence, and who knows what other repairs they'll demand after their inspection, we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe even over 100,000 when all is said and done. It's absolutely insane. I'm not the only one who's furious about this. The day after we got the letter, our neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Everyone was posting about it, sharing their outrage and disbelief. My neighbor Tom, who's lived here for 20 years, was talking about organizing a protest. Sarah from down the street, a single mom with 3 kids, was in tears, saying there's no way she can afford these changes. We decided to have an emergency neighborhood meeting at the community center. The place was packed. I've never seen so many of my neighbors in one place before. The mood was tense, to say the least. People were shouting, arguing, and some were even crying. It felt like our little community was falling apart. A few days later, we had a meeting with the HOA board. It was a disaster. They sat there in their fancy suits, looking down their noses at us like we were dirt. When we tried to explain how unreasonable and expensive these new rules were, they just brushed us off. The HOA president, a guy named Richard, though I've got a few other names for him, had the nerve to tell us that these changes were for the betterment of the community and would increase property values. Yeah, right. More like line their pockets and push out anyone who can't afford their ridiculous standards. We asked about families who couldn't afford these changes. Their response, perhaps this isn't the right neighborhood for them. I couldn't believe my ears. These were our homes, our community, and they were treating us like we were disposable. After that disastrous meeting, a group of us decided to look into legal options. We found a lawyer who specializes in HOA disputes, and he agreed to meet with us. He explained that while HOAs do have a lot of power, there are limits to what they can enforce. The problem is, fighting them in court could be expensive and time-consuming. We decided to go for it anyway. We set up a GoFundMe to help cover legal costs, and the response was overwhelming. It wasn't just people from our neighborhood contributing. Folks from all over the country who dealt with similar HOA nightmares were donating and sharing their stories. As the legal battle dragged on, the stress started to take its toll on all of us. My wife and I were arguing more than ever. The kids could sense the tension and were acting out at school. I was having trouble sleeping, constantly worrying about how we were going to afford all this if we lost the case. I started noticing changes in the neighborhood, too. People who used to chat and wave as they walked their dogs now hurried by with their heads down. The annual block party was canceled because no one had the heart to celebrate. It felt like the life was being sucked out of our once friendly community. As months passed, cracks started to show in the HOA's united front. We found out that two of the board members had financial interests in the companies they were recommending for the siding and fence replacements. It was a clear conflict of interest, and we made sure to bring that up in court. We also discovered that the push for electric cars was tied to a charging station company that the HOA president's brother-in-law owned. The more we dug, the more corruption we uncovered. It was infuriating to realize that all this stress and financial burden was being put on us just so a few greedy individuals could profit. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, our case made it to court. The courtroom was packed with people from our neighborhood, all of us nervously awaiting the judge's decision. Our lawyer did an amazing job, presenting all the evidence of the HOA's overreach and the financial hardship these new rules would cause. The HOA's lawyer tried to argue that these changes were necessary for maintaining property values and community standards. But when our lawyer presented the evidence of the board members' conflicts of interest, you could see the judge's expression change. After several agonizing days of deliberation, the judge finally announced her decision. It was a partial victory for us. The judge ruled that the HOA couldn't force us to sell our cars or add siding to our brick homes, as these were too extreme and not within the original scope of the HOA agreement we'd signed when buying our homes. However, the fence issue was a bit more complicated. The judge said that while the HOA could require changes to fencing, they had to provide more affordable options and a longer timeline for implementation. They also couldn't enter our homes for inspections without our consent. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? Unfortunately, it was just the beginning of a new set of problems. The HOA board was furious about losing the court case. They started nitpicking every little thing, sending out violation notices for grass being half an inch too tall or for leaving trash cans out 5 minutes past the allowed time. Some of our neighbors couldn't take it anymore. The Johnsons, who'd lived here for 30 years, put their house on the market. The Garcias, with their 3 young kids, moved out in the middle of the night, leaving their house to be foreclosed on. It broke my heart to see families who'd been part of our community for years being driven out like this. Even though we'd won the big battles in court, the financial strain of the legal fees and the ongoing fight with the HOA was taking its toll. My wife and I had to dip into our savings, the money we'd been putting aside for our kids' college funds. I picked up a second job, working nights at a warehouse, just to make ends meet. We weren't alone. All around the neighborhood, you could see signs of financial stress. Cars that used to be washed and shiny every weekend now sat dirty in driveways. Lawns that were once meticulously maintained now looked a bit overgrown. People were having to choose between fighting the HOA and keeping up with the endless list of approved maintenance tasks. What was worse than the financial strain was how it tore our community apart. People started taking sides. Some thought we should just give in to the HOA's demands to keep the peace. Others wanted to keep fighting every single rule. Neighbors who used to be friends now avoided each other on the street. The annual 4th of July barbecue, which used to be the highlight of the summer, was a tense, sparsely attended affair. Kids who used to play together were kept apart by their parents' feuds. The sense of community that had made this neighborhood so special was crumbling before our eyes. The stress was getting to all of us. My wife started having anxiety attacks. My oldest daughter's grades started slipping. I was irritable all the time, snapping at my family over little things. We tried to shield the kids from it as much as we could, but they knew something was wrong. I started to resent our house, this place that was supposed to be our dream home. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I felt a knot in my stomach, wondering what new HOA notice would be waiting for us. The joy of homeownership had been completely sucked out of the experience. As things got worse, a group of us started looking for ways to change the system from within. We began attending every HOA meeting, questioning every decision, and pushing for more transparency. We even managed to get a few reasonable people elected to the board, but it was an uphill battle against the entrenched old guard. We also started reaching out to local politicians, trying to get laws passed that would put stricter limits on HOA powers. It was a slow process, full of bureaucratic red tape, but we were determined to make sure no other neighborhood would have to go through what we did. It's been almost 2 years since this all started, and things are still not back to normal. We've managed to fight off the worst of the HOA's demands, but the constant battle has left its mark on all of us. Home values in our neighborhood have actually dropped, despite the HOA's claims that their rules would increase them. The irony would be funny if it weren't so frustrating. Some of the families who left have been replaced by investors buying up houses to rent out. The sense of community we once had is a shadow of its former self. Block parties and neighborhood cookouts are a thing of the past. Kids don't play in the streets like they used to. Looking back, I can't help but wonder if we should have done things differently. Maybe we should have fought harder when the HOA first started implementing stricter rules years ago. Or maybe we should have never bought a house in an HOA neighborhood in the first place. Don't get me wrong. I love our home. We've made so many memories here, watched our kids grow up within these walls. But the stress and financial strain of the past 2 years have tainted those happy memories. Sometimes I find myself daydreaming about selling the house and moving somewhere without an HOA, somewhere we can paint our door whatever color we want without getting a violation notice. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole ordeal, it's to never underestimate the power of an HOA. What seemed like a harmless organization meant to keep the neighborhood nice has turned into a nightmare of overreach and financial burden. Despite everything, I haven't given up hope entirely. There's a core group of us who are committed to staying and trying to make things better. We're working on changing the HOA from within, pushing for rules that actually benefit the community instead of just enforcing arbitrary standards. It's a slow process, and some days it feels like we're fighting a losing battle. But then I'll see my kids playing in the backyard, or share a beer with a neighbor who's been through this struggle with us, and I remember why we're fighting so hard. This is our home, our community, and we're not going to let an overzealous HOA take that away from us without a fight. Maybe someday, we'll get back to being the friendly, welcoming neighborhood we once were. Until then, we'll keep pushing back against unreasonable demands, supporting our neighbors, and trying to rebuild the sense of community that made us fall in love with this place to begin with. It's not going to be easy, but then again, nothing worth fighting forever is. We actually took my HOA to court over this. Bookkeeper, who was not elected, had a husband who owned a landscaping company. He was the only one who cut the grass, and we weren't allowed to see anything about the bidding process. Standard embezzling shit, as well as ignoring a judge's ruling that said one of neighbors had to pay the dues for their dead mother after they inherited the house. This is absolutely outrageous. The HOA has clearly lost its mind if they think we can all just sell our cars, replace all the brick siding, and get rid of chain link fences. Do they even understand how much this will cost each homeowner? Tens of thousands of dollars, easily. Not to mention, the timeline is completely unrealistic. Expecting all these repairs to be done by 2026 is absurd. Who do they think they are? This is going to financially cripple a lot of families in the neighborhood. The HOA needs to get a reality check and start working with the residents, not against them. This is just pure madness. A quick note, usually it's possible for the board or architectural committee to set a new standard, e.g. all backyard fences need to be white PVC. This standard generally cannot be backwardly enforced and only applies to all new updates to the property. I was the prez on a Florida HOA and told by our lawyer that a new mailbox design creates no obligation to replace acceptable existing mailboxes and that no undue burden could be levied on a good faith repair to make someone upgrade. Essentially, an owner can replace their $20 plastic mailbox indefinitely. However, once the post is rotted out, they have to switch to the fancy one. I would think this applies to your brick and fencing, but of course requires a legal interpretation, as in Florida at least, only a lawyer can interpret your CC&Rs. I can't believe the HOA is actually serious about this. Sell our cars, replace all our brick siding, get rid of our chain link fences, and they want this all done by 2026? This is beyond unreasonable. Do they have any idea how much this is going to cost us? Tens of thousands of dollars that most of us simply don't have lying around. This kind of demand is not only financially burdensome but also incredibly intrusive. It's like they're trying to micromanage every aspect of our lives. This is not what we signed up for when we moved into this neighborhood. The HOA needs to back off and reconsider these ridiculous demands.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.